Hello, my name is Miss Jacobs, and welcome to our first learning specifically for middle school reading. Today, our learning objective is going to be connecting to poetry. To be part of this, which I hope you'll join me, these are the following materials that you will need for this 30-minute lesson. One, a PDF or online version of the poem, "This Is Just to Say," by William Carlos Williams. Number two, you'll need a pen or a pencil. Number three, you'll need a highlighter. And number four, you will need a blank lined sheet of paper. I'm going to give you a minute to get those things together before we get started. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that it says the TEKs are 5E and 5F. It says 6 there, but we're doing 6th, 7th, and 8th grade TEKs, which are very similar. The 5E one is making connections to personal experiences, ideas, and other text features, characteristics of genre. So genre is a category. So you can have nonfiction as genre, you can have fiction as another genre, historical fiction could be another genre. It just means a category. A play is an example of a genre. So we're making connections to genre and structure and personal experiences in this first TEK. And then we have 5F, making inferences, which is reading between the lines. We're making inferences and using evidence to support our understanding, which we are going to get to now. So let's move on. All right, I'm gonna move my screen for you. So this is a warm-up, which we're always going to do before we get into the actual lesson. And again, this is a 30-minute lesson. The poem's title is "This Is Just to Say." So as your warm-up, I want you to make a prediction. Now, if we look at that word prediction, you have the prefix pre, which means before. So we're thinking about what this poem could be about before we even read it. So ask yourself, what do you think the poet is going to do or wants to say, and why? What do you think the poet is going to or wants to say, and why? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to write down your answers. There's no wrong or right. It's what do you think the poet is going to or wants to say, with just knowing the basis of the title. So here's the first stanza of this 3-stanza poem. And the question I want you to ask will be revealed at the bottom, which you can already read on your screen. Again, this is a poem by William Carlos Williams, which is available on a PDF online. So the first stanza, and in poetry, stanza is a paragraph. The first stanza is, "I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox." So the question is, what is an icebox? William Carlos Williams unfortunately passed away. This poem was written a long time ago. And that might be a nice way to infer what you think an icebox would be. So if you're not sure what a plum is, there's some ruby reddish purple plum picture right in the corner there on the right of the screen. So what do you think an icebox is? Well, the answer is an icebox is something that kept your food cold, really before refrigerators were considered a common item to see in one's kitchen. You had what was called an ice box, and it was really a refrigerator, but it was quite small. Didn't hold that much. Okay, stanza 2. And which you were probably saving for breakfast. So the question here is, what was probably saved for breakfast? Use your pen or pencil or highlight along with me. And which you were probably saving for breakfast. What is the speaker referring to? What was probably saved for breakfast? So this is where you want to use those inferencing skills to read between the lines. So the answer is, if you haven't already written it down, plums. Plums were probably being saved for breakfast. So great job if you guessed that correctly. Okay, and in the final stanza, forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Stanza 3. What is being described as sweet and cold? Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. You can annotate there that sweet and cold are both what parts of speech? They're both adjectives. Delicious is also an adjective. So 3 adjectives to describe what? Adjectives describe nouns. So what's the noun being described here? Plums again. So good job if you got that. So now we're going to put it all together. Annotating. Annotating is just a fancy word for note-taking. And when we annotate, in this case, we're looking for evidence to support our answers. So let's take a look at this 3 stanza, which again means 3 paragraph poem by poet William Carlos Williams. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. I'll read that again. But before I do, let's look on the right side of the screen. You're going to highlight the words that help defend this statement. Think of yourself as a lawyer, a litigator. Highlight the words that help defend this statement. The speaker of the poem feels bad about eating the plums. The speaker of the poem feels bad about eating the plums. Then you're going to circle a word that lets you know this took place a long time ago. Here we go. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet, and so cold. So if we go back to what we're going to highlight, you're highlighting the words that help defend this statement. The speaker of the poem feels bad about eating the plums. So if you're thinking of the words, forgive me, that shows remorse or regret. Sometimes if we make a lot of words come together without having a lot of meaning, we are doing so because we feel awkward. So this is just to say is a great comedic almost way to get across how uncomfortable the speaker of the poem, perhaps William Carlos Williams in this case, was to confess, perhaps as he saw it, that he ate the plums, the last of the plums. And then circled the word that lets you know this took place a long time ago. What word out of all these three stanzas, where is the one word that lets you know this took place a long time ago? If you said the icebox, you are correct. Nice work. All right, now we're going to connect to the text. And the text in this case is William Carlos Williams' poem. This is just to say. So this is just to say reads like an apology note. I want you to think of a time in your own life when you have felt bad about something you had done. What happened? Do you regret your action or actions? Do you feel bad about it? Do you not feel bad about it? Did you just apologize just to apologize, but you didn't really feel it? So I want you to write your response. I'll give you a couple of minutes for that. And something to think about here is how you feel about it in retrospect, looking back. Maybe at the time you felt very bad about what you did or what you said, but now, with time away from what happened, you may feel differently. Or maybe you have forgiven yourself. Or maybe you see it in a different way and you realize, no, I really didn't do anything bad. I thought I had, but looking back, I see I really didn't. And then explain why. Go deeper. One more minute. So sometimes we need a little help with our writing, getting out our ideas. So when it comes to creating your own poem, which is the next step, we're going to take what you have written on the other slide and turn it into a poem. You can use the poem by William Carlos Williams to get you started. For example, this is just to say, I have, that was, forgive me. So it doesn't have to be about food. It doesn't have to be, this is just to say, I've eaten the last mozzarella cheese stick. That was delicious. Forgive me, but I would probably do it again. That's just a funny, quick example, but maybe it's something more serious that you did. So this is just to say, I have whatever that thing is that you may still feel remorse, you might still feel guilt about, or maybe you're confused about it. Again, there's no wrong or right. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to replay the slides just to help you with any questions you might have. You can look back and see if your predictions were correct. Remember, pre means before. So anytime you see pre, think before. Predetermined, you determine something before it happens. Predict, you're making a prediction about what's going to happen before it actually happens. Pre-play, you're playing something before you actually perhaps play it in real time. So we want to pay attention to those prefixes. They help us understand words that normally we might not know. There's that icebox word. And we know now everything was about the plums. Those deliciously cold and sweet plums, all those juicy adjectives. There they are. Didn't highlight this one, but you can. And we'll read it again. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet and so cold. Now I'm reading this assuming that William Carlos Williams, or the speaker of the poem, feels remorse, feels bad, feels guilty about eating them. But tone can change depending on how you read a poem or any piece of work. Maybe he meant it as a teasing apology, where he really didn't mean that he was sorry. So how would that sound? This is just to say, I've eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet and so cold. That reading makes it sound as if he doesn't really feel so bad about eating those plums. So there's different ways to read something, and that affects the audience's, or in this case, the reader's interpretation of a poem. All right, and we're back to, actually, we'll go here. This is just to say, reads like an apology, in my opinion. And it's just a great launching off point for you to be able to connect to experiences in your own life when you have felt bad about doing something. And again, that can change. Maybe before you felt bad, but now you realize, hey, I didn't do anything that badly. And then, what kind of poem have you created, or are you in the midst of creating? Or maybe you're creating more than one. Go for it. When we write, we are deepening our connection to both whatever it is that we're reading, and to ourselves, and to the world around us. So I believe this poem was written in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, which would be about the 1950s. Perhaps it was written based on his childhood, William Carlos Williams' childhood. But regardless of when it was written, you can understand the timelessness of this apology-like filled poem. Because we've all had moments, even though we call it a refrigerator, and back then they called it an icebox, we can all relate to this idea of regret, of looking back and thinking, I could have done this a little differently, or a lot more differently. I encourage you to take the time to read all different pieces of poetry and literature with an open mind and discover how what you're reading connects to you and the world around you. For example, if this was written by someone from Mexico, what would be different about what was eaten? What kind of cultural differences would you have within the poem? So this desire of wanting to express regret is universal, but the way we express it is going to be different. And how cool is that? When we meet next week, you'll see a new lesson objective with the materials that you will need for our class. I will always give you that time you need, and I look forward to working with you and engaging with you. Reading and writing go hand in hand. But this course is going to focus on reading. I'll be using a lot of writing to help make that connection deeper. Thank you so much. I am Miss Jacobs. I'm an ELA teacher at Tanglewood Middle School. Thanks so much.